Nigeria's main opposition, People's Democratic Party, is asking the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, to expedite the issuance of certificates of return to the Ebonyi State Governor and Deputy Governor designate in compliance with the ruling of a federal high court. Chairman of the PDP Ebonyi State Chapter, Tochukwu Okorie, at the press briefing, said INEC's delay in issuing the certificates of return now stands as a barrier between the inauguration of the new administration. While describing Dave Umahi as ex-governor of Ebonyi State, the PDP notes that Umahi has neither been granted any stay of execution nor has he successfully appealed the judgment.
The different court papers emanating from some state high courts cannot and do not confer any imprimatur of a stay of execution. That is to say, all the forum shopping that the former governor has been doing are only an effort in futility. In a bid to rubbish the judgment of His Lordship, Honorable Justice Inyang of the Federal High Court, sacking Engineer Dave Umahi and his deputy from office, as well as other numerous cases pending before the Federal High Court, some individuals are now engaged in the use of the Ebonyi State judiciary to undermine the rule of law and to destroy the sanctity of the judiciary as the last hope of the common man. Those involved in these unwholesome practices are, number one, the Attorney General of Ebonyi State; number two, the former Chief Judge of Ebonyi State, retired Justice A.N. Wankwo; number three, Barrister Roy Umahi; and number four, the present Chief Judge of Ebonyi State, His Lordship Justice Elvis Ngene.
Well, let's understand these issues better as we're being joined now from Yanagwa by a PDP chieftain, and he's also a member of the House of Representatives, Fred Agbedi. And also here in the studio, we do have a Rice News analyst, that's Barrister Frank TIETIE. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And of course, Fred, I want to start with you. I don't know if you saw that video that played before we came on air. We did see a member of your party really referring to the governor of Ebonyi State as former governor. Talk to us about what the PDP is really demanding, especially from the courts and INEC.
Yeah, good evening. First, let me say that this is a situation of every day for the thief and one day for the owner. Today, the thief has been caught by the owner, and the true to the declarative judgment is that Dave Umahi and his deputy are former governor and deputy governor of Ebonyi State. The PDP is right based on the declarative statement, and for the fact that the thieves have been caught for the very first time, have vacated office, and INEC should quicken not to cause any vacuum in the leadership of Ebonyi State to issue certificates of return. As it's always said, PDP won the lawful votes. PDP sponsored David Umahi and his former governor Umahi and his former deputy. PDP is the vehicle with which they got to government house. The votes are not transferable, as was declared by the judge of the Federal High Court, as it has also been stated clearly by previous judgments of the Supreme Court. And so, in democracy, vacuum is never allowed at any time, and we are in a situation where clearly that the PDP votes cannot be transferred to APC. If you look at the certificate of return of former Governor Umahi, it shows clearly that the PDP won the election. Umahi and his former deputy are marginal characters in that vehicle, and so they could not have moved with the votes of PDP to any other party that did not win the elections. And so what we are saying is that INEC should not delay 1 second, 1 minute in issuing certificate of return, so that there will be no vacuum in the leadership, in the governorship position and deputy governorship position of Ebonyi State as it is today, because Umahi and his deputy, from the moment of that declarative judgment, ceases to be governor and deputy of...
All right, your submission there, Honorable Fred Agbedi from Yenegua, a member of the House of Representatives. But let's quickly look at some of the knotty issues from a legal perspective here. Frank, it looks as if there is a lacuna here. Yes, there is a court judgment sacking the governor of Ebonyi State. Yes, the government or the governor says he's gone to appeal the matter, and we know that it is notice of appeal that is pending before the court of appeal. Is there a vacuum really in Ebonyi State? Should there be a vacuum? Shouldn't INEC be obeying the Federal High Court order immediately until otherwise vacated by a superior court? Frank?
Yes, thank you. The truth about it is that by our practice of law here, a judgment of a court is supposed to be obeyed immediately by the parties concerned. That is not always the case, but there are also procedures provided by our laws, particularly the Sheriff and Civil Process Act, to the extent of enforcing judgments. So what the PDP should be talking about is not urging INEC to obey the judgment. That is unnecessarily persuasive. But if it feels so strongly that the judgment should be enforced, then it ought to take steps towards enforcing that judgment by approaching the same Federal High Court that issued that order for the purpose of ensuring that those orders contained in the judgment are enforced. It is not a matter of begging INEC to do the thing that it should do. We forget that every authority and agency and persons are subjected to the influence of politics, and especially when it has to do with the exercise of discretion. So and then, as a matter of fact, we also have a very serious, but I would say, interesting dimension when an Ebonyi State High Court has now issued a contrary order asking the governor and the deputy governor to remain. That's a matter that is likely subject to investigation, given the directives that the Chief Justice of Nigeria has given with regards to the need to observe respect by courts of coordinate jurisdiction from by not giving conflicting orders. So the PDP needs to do more. It needs to study the judgment, like I have done, to the extent of realizing that there is a lot to that judgment beyond what we read in the press. The judge was treating that matter as if the two gentlemen, Dave Umahi and his deputy, resigned. And he resigned and actually abandoned the PDP and its votes. And as such, we are talking about vacuum here. There shouldn't be vacuum. Honorable Fred Agbedi is quite correct. There's supposed to be no vacuum. But with the facts of having a contrary judgment and a contrary order, which I very much doubt its potency, together with that PDP hasn't taken serious steps towards enforcing that judgment, we might as well leave Umahi there as governor.
I just wanted very quickly to say something about what Justice Iyang Ekwo said in his judgment there that you are trying to quote. Put it in perspective, is that it is deemed that Umahi as governor and his deputy have resigned when they abandoned.
Exactly.
So, I mean, is there a lacuna in such, a statement or part of the judgment?
Well, there is no lacuna.
Does it not have a weight of law?
Of course it does. But what it means is that somebody is just not doing what it ought to do, particularly INEC in this case. But PDP should go beyond persuasion to actually taking steps. They should inform the registrar. They should take proper steps towards taking the sheriff of the court, the sheriff of the Federal High Court, with policemen and other necessary security to approach the Ebonyi State, government house, to the extent of now enforcing that order. But the problem is, even if it is INEC, there is a way the PDP can actually force INEC to obey that court order. It is not good for democracy that a court will have to resort to its coercive powers by borrowing force from the police and other security and law enforcement agencies to the extent of enforcing its judgment. For a democracy to thrive in the interest of peace, stability, and for the progress of the people, everybody, all authorities and persons must obey court orders immediately when they are issued.
But at the end of the day, Barrister TIETIE, the fact that we have, aside from that judgment from the Federal High Court here in Abuja, we did see that expedite motion being granted there in Ebonyi State. But let's move on now and speak to Honorable Fred right now. The fact that we have seen what is being described as sort of a landmark judgment in favor of the opposition PDP. But we do know that Dave Umahi is not the only governor from the PDP who actually defected to the APC. So what are we expecting in the coming days in terms of other governors who defected from your party onto other parties?
Yeah, clearly speaking, this is a turn of events. This judgment has deepened democracy, and clearly it has guaranteed participation and clear expectation that you cannot in one breath move away with someone's properties. So this judgment has come to clearly show that every other action that either to had not been treated in this same manner was a misstep. There are a number of governors who did this, and a number of cases are in court. This will be one signpost with which we are going to deal with the other, cases. Well, I agree that all cases don't carry same prayers that are canvassed and all that. But clearly speaking, if this is tested to the end and Umahi and his deputy, are out of office, it will show to us politicians and those of us who win elections in one platform and then the next moment are running to another platform that you don't have that opportunity anymore, and that you can't have that liberty of running away with someone's property, a party's votes, to a party that didn't suffer, didn't toil for those votes. And so PDP is ready to go the whole hog to ensure that they regain all their mandates that have been taken away illegally to parties that didn't toil for these votes. And I can assure you our party and the new leadership is strong, is capable enough, is competent enough to take this whole journey and ensure that we get our votes back and our positions back for the PDP.
Okay, let's hope that comes to play very quickly and it's not, overtaken by time. If the party does not sit on its Rex. But let me come to you again, Frank TIETIE. The fact that, a notice of appeal has been, domiciled or filed before the Court of Appeal, does it put to rest immediately the judgment of a lower court?
No, certainly not. No, that's, it's elementary law that the notice of appeal being filed at the Court of Appeal does not in any way constitute a stay of execution. So and then whatever pronouncements the courts make is are tantamount to law. So if you would speak with regards to law and practice, as we have it today, the Federal High Court has declared Dave Umahi and his deputy to be out of office and expecting his order to be enforced. But one thing that is very, very important, I must say in a few seconds, is that the unfortunate thing in the David Umahi's case is that the lawyer for David Umahi and the APC did not canvass serious arguments against the watertight arguments that the lawyers for the PDP put up. That's the reason why it is going to be very, very difficult to fault the Justice Inyang Eko's judgment in Ebonyi. That might not actually happen in the other cases with regards to defection of governors from the PDP.
Right, but of course the Federal High Court in Abuja has fixed the 8th of April for adoption of final addresses in the suit that was filed by the PDP seeking the removal of office of the governor of Zamfara State, Bello Matawalle. And guess what? Justice Inyangeko is the one who is involved in this case. Gentlemen, would have to say thank you so much for joining us tonight on the program. That's Honorable Fred Agbedi as well as Frank TIETIE. Thank you for being here with us tonight.